Hey Beals, welcome back to coding a 2D side-scrolling platformer in GameMaker Studio. Today I'm going to show some and some destructible blocks and some destructible terrain as over there. So that's gonna be fun, hopefully, and very useful, I think. So let's jump right into it. If we close down this window and we go to the sprite to take it from the start as we usually do. I have added a couple of new sprites here. We have first and foremost we have the new projectile sprite, and this is just you can have different kinds of projectiles, of course, and stuff like that. But this is just test sprite, so you have that. I've made it gray so that you can use image blend to change the color of it, and that's all there's about that. It's centered and nothing more. Then we have the mask explosion, which is simply a 32 by 32 circle with the mask set to ellipse and full image. So this should just be a mask we can use for drawing the explosions to the surfaces, making the destructible terrain. So nothing big there yet. Then we have added a new player sprite, sprite player shoot. It's a quick edit of the sprite player attack sprite where the hand stops a little before it moves all the way over. I didn't really feel good about making a new sprite for that. Just made a quick edit, but now it's its own sprite, and that's fine. And then we have the particles. We have here in a destructible terrain, we have sprite test destructible, and that's simply to make a destructible terrain overlay. You will have to have a just like with the backgrounds, a background that is the same size as the room, and then you can have it as a sprite, and that sprite will then be everything that is solid but can be destroyed by explosions and stuff like that. So this is drawn just as the backgrounds on top of the screen. So that's pretty cool. And then of course I have the destructible boxes, these sprite destructible box, and I'm gonna show you actually, and I can show you by now, how these can both be used as I showed there, where you can destroy them yourself, or you can draw them as destructible terrain. I have made a short a key you can press. If you press O in this example, they will transform. So now you can not do this anymore, but instead they work as a part of they're drawn to the same surface as the destructible terrain. So that shows how you can add a lot of different objects and then make sure that they are destructible as well, as part of this surface. I was thinking about adding how you could add movable objects which are still destructible, but it would be a lot to talk about, but if you want to do it, it's simply just based on everything we do here, but then just in its own objects. So we just need to have all that code in these objects instead. So it's not too hard to do, but if you want them animated and stuff like that, it will be troublesome. So I chose not to show you that because that's not really that important, and it's a quite big feature to be built in my head at least. I didn't try it out, but it felt like that. Then I changed the script here, the solid play script. Not a big change, simply that we both check for parse solid, and then we check for a new object called parse solid entity. And this new object, this new parent, is quite simple. It's it has the entity as a parent, but because we make this check, it works as a solid block as well. So if you have an entity you still want to be solid but be able to move around with gravity and stuff like that, you can use this parent instead, and then they will function as solid objects. And I think that can be very usable sometimes. So yeah, that's these resources. Then I have a couple of new objects and some changes in the objects. First and foremost, I had to fix some bugs in the window stuff here. We had this small problem where if the window was minimized, the game window, then a bug would appear, because then suddenly the view was set to 0 because of this code, and we don't want that. So what we did here is we have a extra step here where it checks if the width of the window is not 0. And by doing that, we are making sure that the window is not just minimized, because we don't want it to resize the surface if the window is not minimized. So that's just a small change in here. Yeah, just wanted to mention that straight away. And then before going into the main thing here, we also had some changes with the particles, which will have an effect on also what we do today. But mainly I have added some new particles, I'll come back to them, but mainly the arrow particles. Before we had 3 different arrows. We had arrow up, arrow left, arrow right. Now I have 1 arrow particle type, and then when we are using this particle type, we are simply changing it to fit our needs. So now in the object player, when we have the power-up effects here, you will see that it will set the orientation and the direction of the arrow, and it will set the color of the arrow, and we'll do that also in the jump thing down here, where it will set it to yellow and point upwards. Here it will set it to lime and point to either side depending on your ImageX scale. So it does the same, it looks the same as you saw in the start. Show it again. Looks exactly the same, but we just have this small change, so we don't have to have too much small variation particles. You can see it does the same here as it did before. So that was just to clean up a little, and we used that in some of the new particles as well. And I might as well just introduce them to you. We have P player projectile trail, which is simply a trail behind our bullets. When we throw these small goop balls, it will make sure to draw the same projectile sprite. And again, when we are then having the object, it will set this to its own sprite and stuff like that. But then it will have this trail behind it with its own sprite, and that looks pretty cool, I think. Looks nice. Alternatively, a lot of people to make a trail behind, because you can use the same effect, you could do the same thing, make a particle with, for example, your player sprite or stuff like that, and have it show your previous sprite or something like that. The cool thing about this is you can use particles. You do not need to have, like, if you want 10 versions of the sprite after each other, you don't have to like call 10 draw events in your or draw 10 times in your draw event of the player or something like that. Simply by adding particles, it makes it a lot easier. And I actually had never thought of this before. It was just an idea came to me, and I think that's just me who was unknowing before. And but I've seen a lot on the GameMaker forums that people are, when they want to trail something, they're suggesting drawing the sprites like that, where they draw in the draw window, and they had a lot of variables to collect how it looked back then. But I think it's way easier and less of a resource bill to just use these particles instead. If you are happy with using particles, of course. If you are not very fond of using particles, don't do it, but it helps at least, and I think so at least. And then we have the particle explosion, which is simply just using the explosion shape. And then, as you can see by the comment here, this part, the size of the explosion will change depending on what we're doing when we're using the particle. The rest will stay the same. You can change other factors. I've just chosen to only change this factor and have all explosions in this color and stuff like that. But you can change everything. Only remember, if you are in one object changing one parameter of this thing, you either need to change it back in that object, or you need to change it to in every object to change it to what you want it to be. So have that in mind. And then we have this down here, the pixel, and there's almost nothing written down here because everything is customized in when used. But that's simply just making a pixel, and I use that with the. I use the explosion with the explosion, of course, the projectiles with projectiles. I use the pixels when I destroy a block, those question mark blocks. Of course, they are inspired from Mario, of course, to use, so you can see that. But I use, when you destroy them, it will create a lot of pixel particles over it. With different velocities and stuff, so it like explodes in yellow, white, and black colors. So I can show you once more, and that looks pretty alright. My first idea was to use like going in and make. You can use the get pixel functions to get like every single pixel, and then you could make it like they are exploding. But now it just takes random colors to do it, and it looks fine. The other thing was too slow because the get pixel function is too slow. Alternatively, if you know you have this sprite and you want that to explode often, then you can pre-make a DS grid table, whatever it's called, and you can put the values in there, and then you can just go through that list and make the pixels. But this works fine, at least. I think that was all in that code in the object global controller. Then I've changed some stuff in the object player, and I have changed some stuff in object enemy. But first and foremost, I have added 4 new objects. The first was the parent up here, the new parsolid entity, which there's no need to further talk about. Then I have added the object destructible terrain, and that's the object you want to. If you want to have destructible terrain in a room, you will place that object somewhere in the room. You will press creation code, and you will set the sprite index to whatever sprite is the object. Is the destructible terrain you want, and then it will automatically set its position to 0, 0 when it creates. I can show you here. On setup, it will set its position to 0, 0, so it automatically places itself the right place. And then it have 2 variables. It have setup and have update, and then it have the surf, which is the surface it creates. The setup is set to true in the start, and that's because when in the first iteration of the step event we wanted to set up itself so it works. And then we have the update, which is every time you make a change, explosion or something, you want it to update itself so it works better. I will show you how that works in a moment. But then in the step event, the first part up here is a precaution you always need to have when using surfaces. It checks if the surface exists, and if it doesn't exist, then it creates the surface, sets that as target, clears it, and then draws the sprite to it. So that's simply if the surface is destroyed in some way, it will recreate it before any of this down here. The reason being that if you, for example, minimize the window or you go to screen save or something, the computer will sometimes destroy the surfaces because to save off memory and to use it on other processes. So you also always need to have like a check if it exists. You don't need that for the application surface because the GameMaker automatically updates and creates that. So that's a built-in surface, but you need it when you create your own surfaces. Yes, but then we have the setup. It checks if setup is true, then it will set the target to the surface, it will clear it, it will draw its sprite index, then it will reset the target, it will create a new sprite from the surface, and it will make the collision mask so it works, and then it will set a setup to false. The reason I'm doing this is because if we later we will be altering the sprite we had from before. We will always like getting new sprites, so we don't want to have like changing the original sprite, because then next time we restart the game or something, or go to the menu and then go back, it will have remembered what you did to that sprite, and that will be annoying. So we create a new sprite to work with here, and when creating the collision mask, I set the value to about 200, so that like smooth edges and stuff like that shouldn't really be solid unless they are pretty opaque. But you can like have tweak it to your course. If you want it to be like everything that is half transparent is walk throughable, then you can just have it to 128 or something like that, and then that will do that. So tweak this to what you want. If you want everything in the sprite to be opaque, and not opaque but solid, then you just say 255 here, and that's it. But yeah, and then we set setup to false, and then this is the object is set up, and we don't need to do much more about that. Then we have the update. Every time it's told to update, then it will delete the sprite index, and then it will create a new sprite from the surface. So and again create the collision mask, and then it will set update to false. So it simply just repeats this down here, except it deletes the sprite. And again, we don't want to delete the original sprite, thus we have created a new sprite up here. And of course, when this object is destroyed, it will delete the sprite index, and it will set free the surface. So not much here. And the parent is parse solid, and you can set the depth to whatever you want, of course. I think 0 works fine here because we want it to be layered with the other things, but that's just my opinion. So that's how you have the destructible terrain. And then simply to add anything to that destructible terrain, you will just draw it to that surface, and to remove something from that destructible terrain, you will just erase something by drawing with the transparent 0 alpha stuff. I'm subtracting actually. I will show you in a moment. But first, then we have the interactable, the destructible box, and that's a solid entity, and that's where we, for example, can use this. I set the gravity to 0 and the friction to 100,000, because then I'm sure that it will not move around too much. And then in the step event, I simply check if it's destroyed from beneath, and we create a local variable called destroy, and then with all the players, this one can only be destroyed by the player I've created, so that's the case. If the virtual speed is less than 0, then it will destroy, and if it destroys, then instance destroy. So simply it checks if the player is beneath it and is jumping up into it, then it should destroy. Pretty simple. And then we have, of course, the collision with par-attack and with object projectile. If the strength is above 0, you can set whatever value you want here, how strong you need to have the blast to destroy the thing, of course. And the other owner is par player, instance destroy, and the same here. The bullets are based on the par attacks. I've copied some of the code there, so they have some of the same values as, for example, strength and owner. So you can just redo that. And of course, when destroyed, then we have this particle effect, and it simply takes a double for loop where it goes through the different indexes of all the pixels of the sprite, and for every pixel it will just create a random pixel at that position. There's a bigger chance of having a yellow because it's mainly yellow, and then there's a small chance to have it white or black, the pixel. So that's to make it look like it's pretty much the same colors as this box. You could alternatively use get color here, but again, it was slow, it made it lag, and that's not what we want. So this is a fine fix. The key I added, as you can see here, clearly stated, example. This is not something you would want in a game, unless you, of course, make it some part of your gameplay. Sorry, I'll have a glass of water here. Unless you want it to be, of course, some part of gameplay, you can toggle the state, but that would add some more work. First, checks if object destructible terrain exists, or else it will create it. That's just to make sure we have a surface to work with. And then it sets the target to the surface of the destructible terrain. It draws itself and it resets the target. And then it sets the object destructible terrain update to true. And that's just simply what you do. You change the surface, and then you say it should update. And that's how you add something to that surface. Very simple. And then you destroy this object, instance destroy. Boom. Or deactivate of whatever you want. This is again just an example. And that's how I just added them to it. If you wanted them to always be part of the destructible terrain, you will just use this code up in the create event, and that should work the same. So that's pretty easy, very easy indeed, actually. I would say, at least. Then we have the object player. We have a new collision with projectile, and again it's yeah, and then we have a new one for attacks as well, because we didn't add that, but of course we want that. And it's almost the same as in the enemy, except here it checks for par enemy instead of object player or par player. And the same with this one. Small difference, we destroyed the bullet when we get hit, but other than that it's the same. Pretty simple, and pretty much just copied from when getting hurt from the enemy. So nothing big there. And in mobs as well here, we have added collision with the projectile, and again same code. There's nothing too advanced there in any way, and it's pretty much just copies of the old code. But then of course in the player we added the shoot attack, and what we do there is simply adding a new attack down here in where is it? It's up here. Yes. Right now I've just added the control, so if you press down and press your attack button, which is X right now, sorry, X. If you press down, it will shoot. If you don't press down, it will just attack normally. it's not very good controls, but it's just to exemplify how it works. I would never use that control in a game like this because it just doesn't work very well. But I didn't want to add more keys to it than necessary. So yeah, we have this. If press down, then it will shoot, and that's all this code. And else we have this normal code where it just attacks, and it does the same. It sets the attack clock, and it sets current attack to 1 instead of 0, so we know it's shooting. And then we create the bullet, and when we create this bullet, we place it at our position except 16 pixels upwards, so it's not created at our feet. And then it just sets the speed in different parts of it. Sets the owner and there's really not a lot. There's some factors, but I will rather go into them in depth in a moment when we go through the bullet object itself. But we have the standard stuff like vertical speed, horizontal speed, gravity and stuff like that. Then we have the owner and the strength, which is shown before. You'll see here I've set the strength to 0. And that's because this bullet, if it's 0, then the bullet itself doesn't hurt here, but the explosion does. That's the explosion strength. That will hurt, and the explosion strength here is set to 2 plus, depending on the power up, 8. If we are power up with strength. I set the color to lime, so our small balls there are lime colored like our player. I set the explosion radius to 20, that's the radius of the explosion, funny enough. And I of course set explode to true, so we know it wants to explode. If you do not set explode to true, it will just not explode, and then it will just, you can just set strength and it will work as a normal bullet. Gravity is as a standard set to 0, that's why I set it to 0.2. So if you want a linear bullet, you can just not change that. So pretty easy to use as well here, I would say. And if we go to that object itself, the projectile, the last part of this tutorial, I think, the projectile itself, you can see we have these values. It is as well an entity, so that's pretty easy to work with. Inherits the stuff, sets the owner, normally it's no one, strength standard is 1, explode is false, standard explosion radius is 32, explosion strength is 10 as a standard, and gravity and friction is 0. Then of course when it's destroyed it will explode. We'll come to that in a moment. Actually I'll take the step in step event first. What we do here is we cannot really have it collide normally with events, because that doesn't really work because of how things are set up. So what we do is, if we check if it is hitting something by checking if first we set a h speed previous h speed and vertical speed p to get the previous h speed and vertical speed. Then we go through the inherited events, so all the movement code from our parent is run. Then we create the part-top sprite and particle create color. We create the particle with our sprite, so we have this trail effect, and then we have this code down here. And it simply checks if our horizontal speed has changed, or if our horizontal speed is not the same as what before, or if our vertical speed is not the same as before plus gravity, because we had add gravity. That will mean that it had hit something, and if it has hit something, then that's how it is. And then we check if either if this is true, if it had hit something, or if it is outside of the room, then it will trigger this I have stopped code, and it will then, with the object it is colliding with, all the objects it's colliding with it will trigger their collision code with this object, so you can have it get hurt by it anyway. Yeah, I should explain that a little bit better. If we have our bullet, it's coming here. That's a bullet here. That looks a little like a dildo. I'm sorry. But we have our bullet here. Then it hits a wall over here. The H speed will change if it because of this code up here. It will change if it gets to hit the wall, and it will move close to the wall, so it will move to contact, of course. That's our fine code, pixel perfect collision. But since it does that, this object doesn't know that this object have collided with it, because it never really collided. So what I did is then I checked using length direction X and length direction Y to check, depending on this object's speed before impact, that if the object is colliding with it in here, if this object was placed here and it would then be colliding with it, then it will perform the collision code this have if it was colliding with that object, if it has any, and that way we can fake the collision, and then of course it will just destroy the bullet afterwards. So yeah, that's not very hard. Yeah, a little maybe, but it's doable. And then we have the explosion, the grand finale. If explode is true, this triggers when the object is destroyed. So if it has collided with either the player, an enemy, anything, any solid object, whatever, if anything is collided with, then it will, with the destructible terrain. So if there's a surface, it will do this, or else it will not. It will set the surface as a target. It will set the blend mode to subtract. So now we subtract colors from the surface. It will set the color to white, because then we can subtract everything from a position. White is like the highest color, because that's all colors. And then it will draw a circle in the size of the explosion radius. It will then reset blend mode to normal, because else it will fuck up the drawing from now on, and it will reset the target, and it will set the update to true. So that will remove this circle from the surface, thus making the explosion work. And then it will create a par attack, and that's our explosion itself. I reuse the par attack because it works well. The owner is the other owner, so if the player sends the projectile, then the player will be the owner of the explosion as well. It will not follow the owner. We don't want the explosion to mystically move to our player. Our explosion, our object's here strength is the explosion strength of our bullet, and our sprite index is our mask explosion, so this disk. Whoops, there's a mistake here. It should be like this. Anyway, then we set the image X scale to be 1 divided with 16, because that's half the radius of our mask explosion sprite from the circle there, times the explosion radius. So this will make so that the circle is rescaled to be as big as the explosion is, and then of course image Y scale equals image X scale, because we want the same Y scale as the X scale. Then we set the size of the explosion particle, P explosion, and we create the particle. And that's it. That makes for having a nice little explosion. And I'll just show it one more time so you can, I think we will go and spawn some enemies as well in the other end, so you can see that they are hurt as well. So if we just pull this lever a couple of times, if we go over here, and now we have, whoops, we don't want that. Now we have a, you can see they are all getting damaged by both the explosions and the, yeah, only the explosions in this case, but it's a little hard because I cannot shoot while I'm swimming. I just wanted. So yeah, that's how it works. There is like some things you need to take into consideration when you're using these things. If you have like here, you have like a small piece of debris, almost not noticeable, and you can have like 1 pixel of debris, and it will still function as a solid object, so it will stop your player still. And that's just how it is, and there's nothing to do. That's how it is in Worms as well, when they're using destructible terrain there. That, just to let you know, that will be a part of your game, and if you're using this. I was considering, but I will not do this in this example video, because it's only if you want to pursue it that way, that you could make like it checks if an area of the object is less than than a couple of pixels, then it will automatically destroy that part and stuff like that. But it would be a little more advanced to make, so that's I didn't want to go into that for this example in any way. But I've been Simon, and hopefully you have been enjoying this tutorial. Please write in the comment what you think. If you have something specific you want me to go on with next time in this series, or if you have like some specific requests for game mechanics or something like that. I love a little challenge, but a small challenge, but only 2D games. I'm not doing 3D, so I will not do these things. But it will mean a lot to me if you would either like or dislike this video, depending on what you think about it, and then I will see you next time. Bye! Whoa! You seem to be at the end of the video. If you liked this video, or even if you didn't, it would make me incredibly happy if you would just rate it. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.